Hello and welcome back to Somm2Somm, how to be a great sommelier. We changed the name a little bit because that's kind of what we're all about here. So I am super excited for our special guest here today, a mentor of mine from when I first started in wine, and I'm happy to say now a friend now that I live out in Napa. So Andrea Robinson.
Awesome, thank you.
Needs no introduction.
We need to lube up the crowd a little bit more.
As you can see from the shiny red pen, Master Sommelier, going back from your days in New York and then now out here in Napa. And let's see, you do the wines for Delta and consulting, you write books and TV shows. That's how I kind of got into wine, was your old Fine Living show.
Oh, awesome.
And I learned to love it from that. And
good old days.
Yeah, and just general consumer of Riesling and good things.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah. So why don't you take it and tell us your version of your story.
Sure. I'll try to give the short and sweet, but you know,
I'll open this bottle of Riesling.
Sounds great. I started out being interested in food and cooking, and as a kid, and when I got to college, I was jumping in to study finance and economics, but just for fun, took a local wine tasting class at a little restaurant. And had that aha moment that we all, you know, everybody who's tuning in, who's a sommelier or sommelier to be, have had, where you no longer see it as just a beverage and, you know, can you just get the cheapest bottle you can, or if somebody else is paying, then okay, the good stuff's fine. And you realize that it has the power to capture your imagination. So that happened to me as I was working a wine tasting class at the International Wine Center. Mary Ewing Mulligan, first woman American Master of Wine, was running that. And it was Krug Champagne, and Remy Krug was there. And I was there just to set up and clean up and empty the spit buckets. And I had that moment, and I decided to leave my job on Wall Street and pursue wine. So I went to Europe for 6 months. Speaking of mentors, mine was Kevin Zraly. I had also worked his wine class at Windows on the World in New York. And he said, Andrea, if you want to really be able to rise to the top of this profession, you need to go to Europe. You need to see where the classic wines have been produced. And he handed me the Wine Spectator Grand Tasting book and said, go here. And there's 250 wineries in there that show up at that. But it had all of their addresses. And this was back in the day when we didn't have email. So I sent postcards and faxes and got appointments. And then when I came back, I went to work for Kevin Zraly, and he served as my mentor from wine department secretary to wine director and ultimately beverage director. So.
Well, it's interesting that you ended up writing the Intro to Wine book that's rivaled his too. I mean, that was the one Great Wines Made Simple was my kind of go-to intro wine.
Well, thank you. You know, it's funny because I love Kevin's book, Windows on the World, Complete Wine Course, and it has become so much more than even it was when he first wrote it. And it was all of our baby primer as well. It still remains a great one, and he's really expanded on what the content is. But he said to me one time, he said, Andrea, you should write a book. And I said, well, Kevin, I am never going to do that until I have something original to say. And but as I began to spend time teaching, his book was taken from teaching public classes, those Windows on the World wine courses, and he essentially transcribed the lessons and into the book. And I was spending a tremendous amount of time training our staff because we had this huge staff. It was a big, big restaurant.
At Windows on the World, of course.
Yes, Windows on the World.
Know the story, yeah.
Top of the World Trade Center. And about 35 to 40% of our captains, who were the people who would oversee wine service with the sommelier if the sommelier wasn't available. And we had 240 seats, one somm on the floor typically.
Wow.
So our captains had to be really good. 40% of them, give or take, were non-drinkers. They did not drink alcohol because of religious beliefs. But yet, they were very, very interested in bringing the experience to life for their guests as part of wine, because we had one of the greatest wine cellars in the world. So my challenge was, how do I teach people who don't drink wine about how to sell it and get excited about it? And they could all smell it. And they could all really get excited about all the descriptors, the story, the history, and so that became the basis for the book. Was those types of lessons.
I find that's kind of what does it. That especially at the table in a restaurant is that story, the connection of what makes it special and great. Well, we've got a question from the audience here, so let's get started. Go ahead from San Diego.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hey, Fredmo.
Hello, Fredmo. What can we? What do you have for Andrea?
I don't really have a question. I'm just
watching. Okay, great. Well, if you come up with something, chime in. Well, listen, continuing on what you were talking about there, as far as connecting with people, I think one of the things that was great about your show and getting to know you and seeing how you kind of bounce immediately, and it's a skill that you develop, is from consumer entry-level introduction to high-level and everywhere. How do you hone in on kind of the level of where your guest or where your person you're talking to, without, you know, kind of being condescending, but just finding that comfort zone
Right.
to connect with them? How do you do that?
It's a great question, and it's so important because you want everybody who's just getting started to everybody who's really into it to have that payoff time and again. And I was lucky enough, having worked for Kevin Israeli, to see that behavior modeled. He was a master at being able to interact with, you know, world-class collectors who at least thought they knew as much as he did or more, to the person who would see a wine being decanted across the room, would have just ordered a Pinot Grigio and said, I want that. Can I have that? Can they do that to my wine? And he'd say, of course they can. And he'd come over and decant Pinot Grigio. So what I always have been able to glean from the approach that he took and try to bring it into mine is it's just get to that visceral thing, that passion point. So what that means is that you have to create the emotional connection with that person as a person immediately. It's not about wine. It's not about the list. It's not about anything but, how was your evening? Mm-hmm. And then they're going to say something that'll tip you off. Or if they've got the wine list, you know, if it's huge, that's a pretty big wine list, huh? You know, or if they have that intimidated look. So just assess, and whatever looks like needs to be the emotional connection point for them. That's where you have to go. So it's first about, like, I just want to say hey, you know, and then they're gonna do something that opens up and shows you where they are.
Cool. And
So
then also,
you have a question from the live audience.
okay, great. Let's go for it.
This is Douglas Trapasso.
Douglas, hello.
All right. Hey.
How are you? Douglas was just here for Somm Summit back in April.
Oh,
so
fantastic. Yeah, he had a question on our show earlier. He was studying for certified. How'd
yes.
it go?
Oh gosh.
He asked a question. He's chatting his questions.
Okay,
in.
great.
Okay,
Okay, cool.
Twittering and Andrea, do you think anyone, you perhaps, will write a book about the history of windows? I'm forever sad I never got to visit since I didn't take interest in wine until after 9/11. And he then just tweeted in, hi Andrea, it's pouring here in Chicago.
Oh, boy.
Well, we're pouring Riesling, so
Yeah, absolutely.
hopefully that's okay. Wow, Douglas, you know, I think that Kevin has written some pretty wonderful thoughts and details in a book called, I think it's called 107 Stories. I don't know if he ever published it or not, so I feel a little bit, you know, bad that I don't have the specific details, but I know at least at one point he intended that, and he interviewed lots and lots of people from Windows on the World to do that, because the 107 Stories it was 107 stories tall. That's where the restaurant ended up. There was a couple more floors for radio equipment and all that stuff, but so that's worth taking a look for. It may or may not have happened. It was definitely an emotional project, and I don't know if that it ever came to fruition, but it's something to look for. And if not, maybe it's something that we can revisit with him and get him to come back out with.
Now, something the guests might be interested in is like the logistics of it, because your cellars were down in the sub-basement, right? So how did that work during service and everything?
We actually had 3 different cellars. We had a huge one in the sub-basement, and then we did have I'd call it a service cellar on 107, where we had a par stock of, you know, depending which wine it was, from 1 to 20 bottles of a particular wine that we'd be able to access. So that's how that worked.
So then you'd have somebody run between services and just restock from the sub-basement?
Exactly, and it was really fun
It's a
because
long dumbwaiter.
it was actually a very smart and long, like the size of a New York City apartment waiter that went a quarter mile down to the basement.
Wow.
Not a quarter mile into the earth, but a quarter mile down from our lofty perch. And then we also, it was an attended cellar, so there was somebody in there in a parka all throughout service, handing out bottles of wine, freezing their butt off.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's pretty cool.
Well, I spent a few hours, a few services in the cold cellar doing exactly that. Not 100 stories down, but yeah.
Yeah.
It's
pretty amazing.
55 degrees can be pretty chilling after
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
summer in San Francisco. Yeah.
It's true. Exactly.
Well, let's see. One of the things we want to talk about is kind of mentoring and that relationship. You mentioned that Kevin Zraly was your mentor. Our first guest on this show was a mentee of yours, Jillian Balance.
Oh, awesome.
And so, you know, how do these connections work? And these days, it's more difficult because you don't have Somm teams and things like that. So how do you go about finding people to work with, and then how does that relationship work now?
That's, I think first of all, I'm glad you're speaking to it because it is such an important thing, both to learn, you know, just to have skills modeled for you that will guide you professionally, because, you know, there's good ways of going about it and there's bad ways of going about it. And I think for the way I choose people is I try to mostly be open door and mentor as much as I can on whatever level the person needs, but mentoring takes a lot of time. And so when it comes to, you know, somebody that I'm going to invest a lot of time in, I want to more see that they really have that same mentality to the humility that's important in being a great sommelier, and that personal passion and drive, but not to the point of like sort of, I want to conquer the world and you know, clear everybody out of my path, because every single, you know, connection along the way is an important one, whether difficult or not. You know, I had my butt kicked on the floor of a 5-diamond restaurant for, you know, the 14 months that I lasted there. But, you know, with one female, I was the wine director and then the manager, general manager, and I had, you know, 12 unbelievably talented, high testosterone male waiters that were my team, and they were like, we're gonna take direction from her. So, but all that time, so they mentored me in a way of learning how to get to them at a level that they cared about, and how to do what I needed to do to build my credibility with them. So choosing is really a lot about picking the person that has what I think is the right mentality to be a great sommelier. But all along the way, there's other ways that I mentor lots of people with blind tasting practice, because we're here in St. Helena, Napa Valley, and nobody doesn't want to come see us. And I'm always willing to open 6 wines blind for a candidate that are legitimate, testable wines. So we do that a lot with people that are, you know, just kind of passing through on their journey to try to pass their exams. I focus on females a lot because I think females, we all need those role models in both genders, but it's a little bit of a different animal with being a female, because you have to have a certain level of decorum, a certain level of discretion, that
Pockets.
Yeah, pockets, exactly. I know my husband is now used to like looking for pockets in garments. Really, you need a pocket? Yes, I do.
So you maybe expand on that a little bit about, it wasn't that long ago, but I mean, it's changed a lot now. I mean, now it's no big deal. You walk into a restaurant, the gender of the somm is not really relevant, but, you know, it's changed a lot because of people like you and you know, Barbara Worley and other people who have come along and kind of led the way for other people. You know, explain that a little bit about, you know, the challenges then versus where it is now.
I'm just caught up in the fact that you are so artfully stuck in there. It's been not that long ago, because that's right. It's been 1996 since I passed the master's exam when I was 11 years old. Just kidding. But it is when you think about it, 96. We're almost 20 years since I passed the master's, right? So I was number 4, I think, females, and we're up to 24 now worldwide.
Yeah.
So
Jim Rodel.
It's like, yes,
Texas,
so
yeah.
cool, go girl, go
that,
Tejas. But it's very different now, but I think in a good way. I think there's the expectation that a 5'2", you know, female will come bounding up to your table and say, hey, what are we thinking for wine tonight? You know, and there's nothing to do with a particular decorum anymore. We can have such high-end wine programs and fine dining service in an environment that's otherwise, you know, pretty much kind of low-key, right? Elbows on the table, and I love that. So I think there's also greater flexibility now, because people have come to treat the sommelier role, or look at it as, you know, maybe it doesn't need to be full-time. Maybe it's a consultancy, so that it accommodates different aspects of your life. I think women always worry about, well, how do I fit in, like, you know, a whole aspect of like being a mom and stuff like that. And it ain't easy, but, you know, it's like anything else. You do it as a team. And so I think what women don't have as well as men. And I'm just going to say it straight up because I think it's something to really think about, and it's not hard to open your mind to it, is team skills. We're just not that much involved, as involved in general in competitive team sports. Of course, there's going to be a million soccer and softball women out there going, what are you talking about? Of course we do. But it's not as programmed into our makeup from the time we're little kids, unless, you know, you're lucky to grow up in an environment where, you know, you jump straight into soccer for your whole life, or volleyball. And so I think that being able to jump into the restaurant environment where especially, you know, if you're lucky to find yourself in a place that really treats it like a team environment, those are the lessons to just drink in because they're really valuable.
It's true. I mean, you know, the restaurant business is that regimental, you know, kind of almost militaristic type thing sometimes, you know, and it's hard to kind of get your feet around that when you're just thrown in. And that's another thing I wanted to talk about was, like, these days you don't find a lot of restaurants with multi-somm teams.
Right.
In fact, I was just talking to the owner of one of the top restaurants in Dallas who said, well, I'll never employ a sommelier, you know, and he sells millions of dollars of wine a year.
Wow.
You know, and how do we go about justifying the existence of the position to people like that think that, well, they can just reorder the same old wines and that's what people want, and, you know, there's, you know, less opportunities, even though there's more and more people getting certification.
Right. It's true. It's interesting because I think that there probably are, and I hate to admit it because, you know, job security for sommeliers is the first order of business here. Just kidding. But the relevance is something that we all care a lot about and we all believe in. And I think there probably, though, are certain types of restaurants, like sort of steakhouses, that feel like they can kind of check the boxes, and they're probably doing okay. But they are in almost a commoditized environment, right? Because a steakhouse experience is what it is, and there's a lot of them. So they probably do have legitimately an economic disincentive to treat it special. Having said that, if you look at those that do, like the, you know, Sparks in New York City and some of the great ones in Vegas, exactly, where those sommeliers, they don't touch the floor all night. They look like they're in a ballet, and you feel like that's an extra thing that's part of your experience. I'm sure if you ask Wolfgang Puck what about his check average and his contribution to the bottom line of a great wine program and what that does for bringing people to that restaurant, there's no question that he would not in a second would change for the world. He's all you have to do is say the proof's in the pudding, and you look at the great chefs who make that investment, and they are smart people who are bottom line driven, and they are going to do it because it makes sense.
Well, you look at the sommeliers that come through his system, and that's just proof, obviously.
Absolutely.
He's developed a lot of people through those places over the years.
100%.
Yeah, I think, you know, another thing about it is it's, especially with steakhouses, you know, the way to differentiate yourself is with the quality of your beverage program.
Right.
Because, you know, the food is going to be more or less the same.
Yep.
So by having a great beverage program, you're able to drive the sales, and also things that aren't measurable.
Yes.
That customer retention, that connection with the guests where they come back to see you.
Yes.
And you can buy specifically for them.
Yep.
And you have those guests in mind, and that, you know, you have that, and it's kind of, you can't put that on a page on a spreadsheet or a balance sheet and say, well, that's the value.
And that's that customer where you are almost in a commoditized experience of a steakhouse, how you can take that away from it and say, I'm not in that boat. I'm not, you know, XYZ Steakhouse. We're something special, and we create that connection with our guests. So,
especially in a crowded market for restaurants, you have to find some way to differentiate yourself. The other thing I found about sommeliers in restaurants is you play this role as kind of an intermediary where you can fix anything. You float between the back and the front and make things happen, and just take care of the guests.
Yes, I was always the wingman to the maitre d' at Windows on the World because there were never enough window tables, and there were always issues on a Saturday night with turning over a table, but I always had the sparkling wine. And so the maitre d' suddenly had, you know, five seconds of breathing space to try to make that person happy, or I could just usher them away to the bar, to a cushy little velvet seat, and a glass of Veuve Clicquot, which was our house champagne.
I was going to say, how often did you like take people to a glass of port in the bar to get that table back?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
exactly. Yep, exactly.
Things you got to do, absolutely.
We're fixers.
Well, so tell us some other things about what you do now and how you've been able to branch out beyond, you know, with your base to the glasses, to the airline programs, and all the other things that you do.
Well, it's seemingly the glassware was a natural fit. I was asked by all the big grape-specific glass companies to endorse a line of stemware, and on the notion of product differentiation, that was what they were going for. Well, let's have an endorsement. But when you think about it, if everyone's making grape-specific stems, then you're competing on price and customer service, and that is really hard. Competing on price is deadly, and competing on customer service is hard when you have layers of distribution and other things you can't control. So I looked at grape-specific glasses, and I came to realize in testing them that there were lots of problems with their performance with the grapes for which they were designed, and that there were certain best practices in glass design for all grapes. So that was just that, oh my gosh, here we all have been doing this whole grape-specific thing. And of course, I'm not going to go to a collector or a great sommelier and say, hey, you know what, this is kind of all wrong. Because everyone's got their own aesthetic experience and their own drinking experience. Me, though, trying to just apply a really scientific lens to it, I realized that I couldn't in good conscience go with the grape-specific thing. So we did our own design based on those best practices. And that was a natural extension, and it's been a labor of love because, just so many people are convinced of the other approach. And there's excitement in it, and I get that. So that was that, and all of the other things, and I think sommeliers should think this way. Think about all the touch points for wine that are out there. And I remember consciously thinking about this 18 years ago or so when I first started working for Restaurant Associates, which is now the Patina Group. And they had grab-and-go facilities in office buildings. They had business and industry catering in fancy banks. And then, of course, they had public restaurants in great places like the Rockefeller Center skating rink. And I thought, well, wow, beverage can be in all these different places. And then my mind just went beyond that to think retail. There are all kinds of retail environments, and now you find wine in a 7-Eleven, right? Yeah. To hotels, and I worked for Starwood Hotels for years, and I was really excited about the idea that we had the St. Regis and the W at the high end, and we had 4 Points and Sheraton at the more, consumer-friendly pricing end and the less full service. And I liked the idea and the challenge of, well, how do you make wine cool or interesting, or at least depletions, making sense in all these environments. The airline thing was kind of a natural because it was another place where that is a great way for an airline to differentiate product. They're selling safety and travel, getting you from point A to point B with minimal hassle. Okay, after that you've got seats, you've got smiles in the aisles, and you have the creature comforts, what's offered for sale or for food and beverage. So that's been really fun because Delta is so authentic in their commitment to it being a great gastronomic experience. It's not just, well, let's put a name on the food and a name on the wine.
Oh, you were talking about the way they train the flight attendants and the wine service and everything, and then you come out to your event, and it's a big part of their culture. That's great. It
is. It really is. And they what's cool about it, or there's many things, and we know that the wine part's cool, but for Delta, one thing that they think's cool about it, which I never would have thought of, but of course it makes sense, is it's a way for a huge company to support small family-run companies. And yes, we buy some large quantities of wine from more commodity styles of wine for our big volume categories. But we get to support people like, Mary Edwards and little companies that don't make a lot of wine, but that get this new stage. It's really fun because it's something that they as a big company culture care about. That's
really great.
Yeah.
I got to say, this Riesling is just jumping out of this glass right now. These glasses are really performing.
Well,
it's
between
really
the wine selection and the glass, I think we have a winner for sure. This is beautiful.
It's really good. Now, what are the ideas behind this to make it work as such a multifunctional glass?
Well, it all came from us trying the same wine out of so many different stems and coming again and again to essentially what you might call, if you go by the grape-specific categories, a burgundy shape. Consistently was the best shape across varietals, quality levels, age levels. So the wider globe, the wider part of the bowl, and a pretty significant pitch or difference between this diameter and the narrowness of the rim, so that you're channeling or funneling the aromas. The sort of more chimney tulip shape, especially a really big one and a really deep one, dissipates the aromas in wine, and now that we are sort of less focused on where the wine hits on your tongue, which isn't really too much about the complexity at all, and more focused on the bouquet as to the source of detail. And you know this from being the amazing blind taster that you are. The bouquet is everything. Now, don't laugh. Come on, you're an amazing blind taster.
Yeah, I could be better.
We could always be better, but so that really drove the designs. And the red shape. There's a white and a red. The red shape is quite similar, slightly larger bowl, so you get more aeration. It's smaller, so you get the delicacy and the chill of a white, but not so huge that you lose the detail. Because what we found with some of the really big venom-inspired glasses is that it's such a big surface area for the wine that if it's an old wine, it can advance overly quickly and die on you. And some of the younger, especially New World, exactly. Right. And with younger, and often New World wines and that have maybe higher oak and alcohol, you lose the detail that's there in the wine, and you end up with all of this just oak and alcohol. And that's not, we're looking for more than that.
It's funny. I think, these are consumer products. You can go to the store and buy them, but I really think that they're really useful for a lot of programs. They're durable. You've got a white and a red.
Right.
It works, and especially for the type of lean and mean programs we're doing with small lists, it works really well. I think we get tired of sometimes the hegemony of the big guys, coming after us all the time. And I'd like to see a little more diversity with these types of.
Thank you. It's fun. I mean,
how they polish.
They polish really well, actually, and they are very durable. They don't have any lead, and they're very, very durable. They test as similar durability to the Triton that you get from Schott.
Oh, cool.
That material, which I think they say is titanium and reinforced, like your nose.
Technology.
Yes. So actually, Will Costello, who just passed his masters at the Mandarin Oriental Twist in Vegas, is a fan, and they use them there. So
cool.
some of the higher end places are.
Yeah, it was a star-studded class this year. It was good to see so many. Jack Mason, young guy,
super
doing
exciting.
It, and all those guys. It's great.
I know.
What do you think about the way the court is now, the way it's so stacked up? As far as so many people, I just saw an article yesterday about all these tech guys going out to get their certified pins and then wearing it to work and stuff. They have no interest in working on the floor. But, do you think that's good, or do you think that's something that kind of works against the whole purpose of the court certification?
I think it's great to be able to, for people who are interested, to be able to get some sort of an exposure to that type of education. I do think that we have to be super careful about keeping the channels open for professionals so that they don't get discouraged and overly stacked up, because obviously you need people who have the credential to be able to train and examine, and we don't want there to be that level of frustration. So actually it's wonderful to have a class as big as the last one did to pass and be able to jump right in, because with the expectation and the level of energy, it's always there that the newest masters jump in and examine and train a lot.
Yeah, we were trying to clear up spaces for the guys, but the year I hit it was a little tough.
Yeah.
But hey, that happens. It ebbs and flows.
Yes.
That's the nature of the thing. So,
yes, it is.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool stuff. Now, how often do you test with the court? Do you go in and did you work this one, or?
This time around, I did the theory exam in San Francisco, and actually it's the first time I've done any examining in several years. My youngest kids are 8 and 10 now, and we kind of jumped into that full bore when we moved to Napa Valley and I got pregnant with our daughter, because it's just that time is just so fleeting, and there were so many new young passes that really wanted to kind of jump in. And I had done, 9 or 10 or 11 basics, and I'd hosted as the host venue in New York City two basics and 3 advanced, and I'd done a couple of masters. So I felt that it was both appropriate from a family perspective, but also reasonable from a there's plenty of talent here perspective, that I should step back and take a little breather. I'm ready to jump back in, though. I'm certainly loving working.
So having
with
done
people.
it, you must have seen some fun, interesting things during the service part of the exam or anything. Any horror stories of note? We won't mention any names, but just things that happen.
Well, I think that one of the things that I always say to people, and so we'll turn this from a horror story into a takeaway point, to keep your game face on and keep your mindset as if you're in your own restaurant. Because I had a person that I was rooming with, actually, who got to the table where they're talking about food and wine pairing, and she worked at a kind of a California fresh, sort of Bradley Ogden type restaurant, not that one, but someplace down in Southern Cal, and they asked about a pairing for a dish, and she started talking about sauce chasseur, which is a classic French mother sauce. Had nothing to do with anything ever on her own personal menu, but it just, in the nervousness, jitteriness, it popped to mind. And she said, oh, how about with the sauce chasseur? And they said, oh, that's interesting. What's in a sauce chasseur? And she had no idea. So the takeaway, keep your game face on and in your own restaurant. And if your own restaurant has 19 wines on the list, then you're obviously going to have to trail on the floor with other people and get comfortable in their space too, so that you can really have that confidence. My personal advanced horror story is that I was doing the wine service with the Garrodon and the cradle and all that stuff, and I presented the cork and got the approval. Took it it was on a coaster and turned. And as I was stepping, it rolled off the coaster onto the floor, but just as I was stepping, I got the perfect drop kick of the cork in, so it hit the tip of my foot and just arced across the room. And I think the person that was examining me was Roger DeGorn, a great master sommelier in New York City, and I looked at him, he said, and I said, excuse me, I'll just go retrieve that. And I turned and went and
3
got
points?
it.
Yeah, right.
But I still managed to pass.
That's the thing. It's so much of it is you make mistakes, how you roll with it.
That's right.
It's how you carry it. I know people have lost their trays during certified
Yeah.
and still passed.
Right.
And the great what you touched on though, because for me, what got me through was always treat them like your best regulars in the restaurant. The people that you're excited when they come in, and just we're here to take care of you.
Exactly.
And what can we do?
Go ahead and have that emotional connection that you normally would. Forget that it's an exam and get ready to have fun, because then you're going to turn their level of sort of severity down, or at least there's going to be that emotional connection that makes you start to feel like you're not taking a test and like you are doing what you do best.
Yeah, I remember when I walked out of my advanced, I looked around and said, I don't know about these guys, but I sold a lot of good wine.
That's great.
It was fun. It was fun, you make it fun.
That's awesome.
It can be really great. So. Let's see, do we have any questions from out in the audience? Yeah, great.
And this is from Chris McCard. What is your favorite noble botrytis? Does that make sense? That's
Yeah,
hero.
absolutely.
So noble botrytized wine, right?
Right, absolutely,
Oh,
yeah.
gosh.
Okay.
Who's paying?
Yeah, right.
Yes, what do you say?
Well, going back to exam things, I had that question in my certified, and they said it wasn't noble botrytis, but it was non-fortified dessert wine.
Okay.
And I was really relaxed in my exam, and I just rattled off, Ricciotto di Valpolicella.
Ruh-roh.
Which was like, and then afterwards I was like, what? And so I had Reggie Narito was the master, and he looks up at me and he's like, really? You got a couple of producers on that? I was like, yeah, Quintarelli, Del Forno, what do you want? And then afterwards I was like, Sauterne,
Ruh-roh.
Riesling,
Yeah.
hello?
Gosh, okay, well, my favorite, it's like saying who's your favorite child. I really have a lot of styles that I love. I am
Just
loving,
say TBA,
honestly, I'm loving the 2012 Sauternes. I mean, they're just resplendent. And they're not that high, they're fairly high botrytis, but not like, one of the amazing years of it. But there's a freshness to them that's just fantastic. And then,
So who are some producers apart from, say, Kim that, that you enjoy?
so Chateau Coutet is fantastic. Chateau Guiraud is
Yeah.
great.
Always a
And
big
then, what is that one? Blanche.
Tour Blanche?
Tour Blanche.
Yeah.
It's not even classified, but it's always so good. So it's usually a better deal.
Raymond Lafon is another one that's
Yeah,
right there. That's
exactly.
Great.
Yeah.
I like Guiraud because it has the high percentage of Sauvignon, so
Yeah.
it has a little more snap to it,
Yeah.
especially in those richer years.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well,
Smarty
very cool. The
pants.
Sauterne, there we go. So, all right, there's the answer to that one.
Cool.
Anything else? Fortified reds? Anything? What have you
Because
had
they're right
in
on the tip of your
What have you
tongue.
had in your travels that have been kind of, unusual lately? I mean, people are playing with their lists, so you gotta it's fun to just go and see how people are thinking.
Yeah. Well, I have had, I'm seeing so much talk about Falanghina from Campania in Italy, so the white grape is really getting a lot of play. And back in my day when I was writing lists that would have any Falanghina at all, there was one, and it was Master Berardino. And now you've really got a lot of emerging producers, which is cool. And I always love any northeastern Italian white grapes, both the indigenous, but also like the Sauvignon Blanc from Friuli is loving that. Yeah.
It is as good as anything. We just
Yeah.
picked up a Pignolo from our producer.
Ooh, nice.
And it's pretty crazy stuff. Big, tannic, burly.
Wow.
It's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah,
Cool.
and then I guess speaking of Falangina, there was just an article today in New York Times about Falangina.
Well, who knew?
Which is pretty cool.
I have to
We're
catch up on
timely. We're
my
on it.
New York
Yeah.
Times reading. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Let's see, what else we got to talk about? We can talk about our sponsor here, our Ligne W wine openers, our new sponsor for the show. This is a nice little double hinge with the barrel staves. I was told that this was once a barrel for Chateau Palmer, which is pretty exciting. And
Third
you have
growth.
a connection to Palmer too, right?
Third growth, Margaux, and I picked grapes there in 1990. So, pretty cool.
Not bad. That's why that 90 was so good. Huh? Yeah. Anybody know the commune on Palmer while we're at it? Commune.
Oh, even I'm not remembering it now.
It's weird because it's right next door to Margaux, but it's Kennebec. So yeah, it's
There
right
you
on
go.
the road there. Yeah, it's just a
See,
little
that's
theory
why
teaser
you're,
for everybody out
yeah,
there.
Cantenac. There you go.
Yeah, clams. Cantenac, Lavard, Arzac, Margaux, and
Ooh,
Susan. Yeah, that's
there's
the
his little
acronym.
mnemonic device.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent.
Whatever it takes, right? Sometimes the theory just
That
stays
is what
there.
it
I don't
takes.
know. Yeah. Well,
Awesome.
thanks for joining us and bringing the glasses.
Thank
and,
you.
You know, the lineup, this is the Solomon Untaufkugel Erste Lage Krimstall Riesling. It's
Sure
the
is awesome.
2010. We love Bert Solomon. He's such a great guy, and they've 223 years making wine in the Krimstall. So
Wow.
not bad.
Wish you had taste
treat.
division.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Right.
Thank you
Cheers.
so much.